Hello. So, in the context of the patterns for enterprise applications, what I'm going to focus now is on this part that deals with the application integration of enterprise applications, where basically you start developing your application using a set of services, and so you don't implement all the functionality, and you take advantage of services that are available online and that you can reuse. For instance, in your project, you already have this case when basically you do the login using Phoenix instead of implementing all the part related with managing or the management of passwords, usernames, and so on. So basically, you don't need to worry about it. We don't need to worry even with the availability of the service because probably they have much more resources than can have replication of servers, and so there's a big advantage of using this service. So what happens then? What are my concerns, and I need to worry about when I actually implement these integration of applications? So basically, you have the domain logic, and so the domain logic may require to access data from outside and integrate. So, for instance, you have part of your information here, for instance, about the user. So the username comes from outside. Okay, actually is replicated in your model. Sometimes you need to have some concerns about keeping consistent. In this case, it's not a big deal, I would say, because the username is not going to change. But it's one concern, okay? But what I'm going to focus now is in terms of actually what we are going to request from remote services. And basically there are two patterns. So the main idea is that, it's a basic idea around this actually, is that when you do object-oriented programming, your design tries to define small entities, small classes, and a lot of interactions between the classes. So you have a lot of interactions because your concern is to have a very detailed cohesion with the small entities, with the very cohesive small entities. And in some sense, you just duplicate the invocations, but you don't worry about that because you are in the local context. So, and local invocations are quite fast. But when you move to the to remote invocation, this is order of magnitude higher. So you would like to basically reduce these emphasis on the cost of invoking something that is remote. And basically, what is proposed in the book are two patterns that you are actually already using. And the two patterns are basically remote facade. And by remote facade, the main idea is that, okay, so for instance, you have an address. And probably if you have an address, probably you just have, and you have information about the address, you do several invocations: get street, get city, get zip, get whatever, okay? And then, if you move to a remote context, it's nice to have more coarse-grained interfaces, in the sense that instead of doing three invocations, you do a single invocation where you get the address data and you get all the information about this, okay? So one of the things is remote facade, and basically is reduced, so convert several remote invocations into, or transform several remote invocations into one invocation. And related to this is actually the other pattern, which is the data transfer object. Okay? So when you do the data transfer object, is the same idea. Now, not from the point of view of a single invocation, but the number of invocations, but the point of view of the amount of information that you carry, so that you take, that you receive. Why? Basically because you are going to create objects that contain more information, that aggregate several information. And again, you don't need to do several invocations to get the information. So you get all the information. And then here there's a trade-off about how much information you are going to have in a DTO, in a data transfer object. So data transfer object is basically a bean that only contains gets and sets, have no domain logic, but is used basically by the facade to transfer data from one side to the other, so from the local to the remote context. Okay? Good. So, you have different formats for these DTOs. Currently, you have technology that basically generates this for free to use. So, for instance, in Spring, when you have these a REST interface, you convert from the DTO to JSON, but you can convert to XML. And then you have also another problem, but actually this is not anymore a problem today. If you don't think in terms of performance for software engineer, because you have technology that does this mashing and mashing of data. Of course, if you have really demanding resources, demanding requirements in terms of performance, or you want to send a lot of data, maybe you need to program your own mashing and unmarshalling. But this is not very common that you have to do it. Probably just very specific cases. Because why? Because all these conversion from this format to the format on the other side is done automatically. So they are generic solutions, and of course, generic solutions are not optimized. Because of course, if you really know the semantics of the data, maybe you can optimize some of these marshalling and unmarshalling. Another thing that you may discuss in this pattern is who's in charge of converting domain entities into DTO objects. Okay, you may implement it as a third-party entity that basically keeps these both sides clean in some sense, that this side does not know about that, and so the domain does not know about the DTOs, and the DTO does not know about the domain. So this is done by this entity. But so it depends a bit on what is your requirements. Some of the cases, for instance, the DTO knows the domain and copies the information of the domain. So you can have different solutions here or decisions. But the main point is that it's relevant to copy the information and to aggregate and to send several information at once instead of sending it. So the turning point here is how much information are you going to send? You don't want to send all the database. So basically, the aggregation of this, deciding how much information you send here, depends on the type of request you are providing. So, and again, it's a trade-off in the sense that most of the time you would love to have only one DTO for albums and basically use them for all the types of requests. But some cases, then it means that for some requests you are optimizing, but the others, the solution is not optimized because you are sending, for instance, more information that is needed. And if this becomes a bottleneck in your code, or if this becomes something that gives you performance problems, then you need to have different DTOs, for instance, ones that have more information. Or other solution you have in the construct of DTO, you define the depth of copy. So how much information are you going to include there? So it's a decision on depending on the domain and depending on the type of requests you are serving on the server side. Okay, so that's it.